Hello, John. Thank you for coming back onto the show here. We been away for a little while, so we're back.
See everybody? He's okay. He's fine.
I am okay. I am well, and so don't worry. But a lot has happened in the news. But I just want to mention that we are live on YouTube. We are also simulcasting on X Spaces. So the ones that would like to ask questions, please type them in the chat box or ask for the mic on X Spaces so you can ask your question to John. I'm sure that you have lots of questions about what's going on in the world and current events and everything.
What's
So,
going on?
yeah, we have this big thing that's happening with Iran. And I want to mention to the audience, make sure you hit that like button, share the links, try to help grow this show so we can reach a larger audience. We greatly appreciate it. And also help John's work by going to his website. In the description box of this video and all the videos that I do with John, there's a link. You click that link, that will take you to his website. You can sign up for his periodical, and you can also sign up for a reading. We'll talk about what that all entails throughout the show. But John, thank you for another show here, and
Yeah.
hopefully we can answer some of the questions that individuals have tonight about the big events that are taking place in the world.
You know, this is the second time in my long career of forecasting that I have followed a situation and documented my interpretations in this case of Nostradamus, uh, about a future war of the United States with Israel on Iran. I have I started looking at this possibility in my first book, Nostradamus and the Millennium, and published in 1987. So I played this and the other one on 911 are my two longest evolutions, boldest predictions, if you will, of something happening decades, 40 years from now when it started, and now it's here. Similarly, this is what happened in 1983 when I started writing for the Rajneesh Times, my first published interpretations of Nostradamus. I started talking about the Twin Tower, or the Hollow Mountains of New York being taken down by terrorists. And that all the way led up to a lot of documented things I published that ended up happening on 911. So so these are my two long-term roles as playing a precog, a kind of not a sleuth, but a sooth slayer. Trying to see a terrible event and avoid it if I can help enlighten enough people by talking about it, or at least help them understand the blow when it comes. And this has been in my prescient gaze for 43 years, this war, and now it's here. So it's quite a thing to, and also what I did, because I could feel it coming at last, wishing never to have it come. I started rushing out a distillation. My last Hogue prophecy report is a distillation of all my evolution of foreseeing this Iran war and how significant it is for the future directions of human history. And so you can all read that if you subscribe to the Hogue Prophecy Report, which the link is there. And really, I right now we have entered these next 2 years are really going to be important in the prophetic world of anticipating major changes, some of them good too, some of them surprisingly good, that comes out of something really bad. And so now that this war is not going to be a few days or a few weeks. This is going to be months, if not a year. I'll explain on that a little later. But so to get the backstory, some of you have been reading me all these years, so you know what I'm talking about. But some of you who haven't been, uh, please help me continue this work by subscribing to the Hogue Prophecy Report, because now it's really the time, it's really important time for my work to help people anticipate further changes that are now going to be triggered by what has happened just a day and a half ago. And so you would, if you get that, if you sign up for the report for $60 a year, or do automatic payments of $5 a month, you're going to get the backstory. You're going to get why this big question, how did we get here in these last 43 years, is all laid out very clearly and succinctly in this work, referenced and documented. This is so important that people who presume or declare themselves working in prophetic fields give you the documentation of what they get right and what they get wrong. So please, if you've been feeling to do it, this is the time. This is the time to join the Hogue Prophecy Report. There's never been a more important time than now. I swear it will help. I think it will help all of us understand what's going on and how to respond and adapt to things that are coming, So it's an unusual time now, so I had to make my pitch on that first. So now I'm already working on another set of reports that are going to look at how these things are developing, how I got so much of it right, although I didn't wish to. A lot of my, you will see how I anticipated this, because this was published a week before the war started, all these articles, and they were written through the bulk of February, most of them in the early to middle part. So I want to start with something that kind of triggered an idea that is very important to understand. I mean, the key opening action in this war of America and Israel against Iran started with the first casualty and the first 6 bombs being dropped by the United States on the compound of the supreme leader of Iran, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, or Khamenei, and a group of people that he was meeting with. And I thought, this is so strange. How could he make it so easy to try to decapitate the Iranian government, literally putting himself into the hands of those like Trump and others who wish to believe that they can overtake Iran by a decapitation of its leadership? Well, it's an interesting thing to note that before he died, and those men and women died with him, he had left messages online to the open source of a lot of the things that he felt. And I have come to understand and recognize now that he used to say he has been the Ayatollah since 1988. So after 7 or 8 years of Khomeini as the original Ayatollah, or first, of the Iranian Revolutionary Iran, he came in way back in the late 1988. So he's literally been the supreme leader of Iran. Now, it's important, and I try to educate people about this, but because you will rarely hear this in the Western press. It is so ignorant and so racist and so Islamophobic that they don't even try to understand what the Iranian society and it is, I would contend, and I'm going to shock some of you, that it is a far more democratic system than we have here. Everyone is elected by the people, or if not by the people, they are elected by their peers. You could call it a two-tier democracy. There is democracy, and there's parties, and candidates, governments, and all of that. And in the parliament, people vote just like we do for our, and many democracies do, for our parliaments and congresses. And then there's another tier which tries, because it is a Islamic republic, it has a two-tier democratic system where you could call the Congress of the people who vote for the things that are needed, vote for that layer of society. But there's also a council of ayatollahs and clerics that are elected to choose the supreme leader. And if they choose this way, and the supreme leader or the candidates for that usually have to go through a test, taking a subject of Islamic jurisprudence and write about it. For instance, let's say somebody did it on music and the Quran and what the Hadith. There's two major scriptures of Islam, which is the Quran, which was basically channeled through Muhammad, and then there's the book where Muhammad, outside of his channeling, uh, made comments, answered questions, and gave answers as he saw it as another Muslim, what maybe Allah meant by these shuras, these statements in the Quran that came through him. So he's kind of standing outside of being the channel and being just another Muslim, although, a Muslim of significance and respect is going to try to understand from his own views what the prophecies or any other things. There's actually no prophecies in the Quran that I could really find there, but he speaks in prophecy about these times, Muhammad. And the apocalyptic revelatory side of Islam is just as rich as it is in Judaism and in Christianity, but it's least known by people of the West, almost not known at all. So I've also tried over the years to um, take out the passages from the Hadith, which is where these come from. This was a book that uh, was word of mouth for 3 centuries until the 10th century, when it was actually set down into a permanent wording. And now it's an interesting thing because Arabic changed over the centuries. And so a lot of the passages that, and of course, like any other religion, Islam goes through its more liberal cycles. It goes more into its conservative fundamentalist cycles. And in the 10th century, it was going through a fundamentalist cycle. So there's a bunch of scholars in Ankara, Turkey, that are trying to separate in the Hadith anything that looks like it is written in 10th century Arabic, and trying to just and keeping only the things that are said by Muhammad that date back to the 600s, the 7th century, which was much more of a liberal look at Sharia law, holy law of Allah. And so, and get all the fundamentalist stuff that came late, wasn't represented in what Muhammad said, that was inserted. I wish this would be a technique that people would use. I imagine some of you have seen Tucker Carlson's very interesting encounter with the ambassador, U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mr. Huckabee, Mike Huckabee, or maybe Mike Huckaboob, who uh, was asked it was the only I thought it was the only honest thing he said that wasn't guarded. He let it out, and it felt so true because he said it with his whole being. Was that moment when Tucker, in his incredible way of interviewing, I'd love to do an interview with him, be grilled by him, because he's so good at it, and he's polite, and he's going, well, then what are you saying? You're saying that That's in Exodus 15 or some. I think it's one of the earliest things. It says about the famous time where Abraham was given by the Lord of Hosts um, a certain area of land that it said was going to be for his people. But Tucker didn't even know this, and Huckabee would just jump like so many Christian nationalists do, ignoring the first three times that the Lord spoke to Abraham about this, which I've published in my work. So you see it in my work. But it's an interesting point to go, and we've had some talks about this before with Paul and I, is that there's a sequence where it seems that I would contend that a lot of Christian nationalists and Zionists only seem to focus on the acts of Isaac, the first Jewish descendant of Hebrews, who in the first three times the Lord spoke to Abraham about when he laid out where this greater land, the promised land, was going to literally be, to make it simple, his borders are the Euphrates River to the east and the Nile River to the west, and everything in between, which is most of the Middle East. But the Hebrews like to forget about the fact that this was stated when Isaac wasn't even a twinkle in Abraham's eye. Sarah was barren, and Sarah could not have children, his wife. So he asked the serving maiden. Um, I can't remember her name at the moment, but the serving girl was fertile, so they all three consented that Abraham's seed must survive. And so her vessel was available. So she gave birth to his first son, who was Ishmael. Ishmael would become the founding progenitor of the Arabs, the Arab Semites. They are Semites too, I must remind you, because the Zionists would make you think that Arabs are not Semites, but they are cousin brothers of the Jews. So, but they ignore that because then it's hard to explain why you're murdering your cousin brothers in Palestine, perhaps by upwards of 1 million so far, in a genocide of your own cousin brother Abrahamic blood. So, in brief, the Ishmael was a teenager by the time the Lord was telling Abraham of this area between the rivers that would be for all of his seed. Let me stress again, all of his seed. That's what the Lord said to Abraham. So that means that this thing that one part of the seed has decided is only their land, that is given only to them, Eretz Israel, the greater Israel. Um, and that comes in later stages, which I think those are altered. Something I've always followed is the earliest evidence before it becomes popular is usually the best. For instance, if I were saying if you really didn't have time to get into the whole brambles of UFO literature, I would tell you just read An Interrupted Journey. Read it because it's about the Hills, um, Betty Hill and her husband, that Barney was they went to a psychiatrist because they were very traumatized by having lost 3 hours of their trip back home from a certain trip they were doing, and the psychiatrist was a pure psychiatrist, it was not, this was before UFOs really took off as a cult, popular interest. So he said, so he taped everything and had transcribed all their things, and he was a very good hypnotist because, as a psychoanalyst, because he did not suggest anything, and so And it's a real skill. And there's a lot of people that have written major books about close encounter third kind that basically the person was an amateur and say, "Oh, are you talking about the grays?" And of course, the person that's under a trance will say yes, because that's what happens when you're under a trance. If you're stimulated by anything that the person that's taking you down is saying. So it's like, um, if the person wanted to ask a question, he wouldn't say, "Were these the grays you were talking about earlier?" He would say, "Well, what did they look like? What were you looking at?" And they might say, "I see these figures." Well, what do they look like to you? These are the kind of questions that this psychoanalyst uses. So it's great to watch, I mean, to read, because this book, Interrupted Journey, is by John G. Fuller, is really the three first passages of God talking to Abraham about what this land was all about and for whom it was for. And basically, I think that, Bibles are also written by human beings that have their faults. They're doing the best they can, but I think I rely more on the initial messages purported to being from God rather than all the stuff that passed down, which has a certain quality of, well, now God's updated it. Now he actually says it's Isaac and the Jews it's all their land. My gut feeling, I don't think that's true. Where I think, because here's the proof of it in a way. Here's Isaac. Isaac wasn't born. Sarah would later become fruitful again, and Isaac would be born. But the first seed of Abraham was ready to, through the servant girl, to have his entire seed be born of the Semitic race, with Ishmael as the first one. And then suddenly it was now expanded. But I don't think that changes what God says when he says, all of your seed, because Abraham is the source of the Jews and the Arabs. And since that area covers most of what is Middle East, what we call Middle East today, I think the Lord didn't change. What, God changes his edicts? Does God, oh, I made a mistake. God made a mistake and now he wants it to be this? No, God should know what he wants, I presume. And so this this coming to a head right now is something that's been a tension that has reached its final tension for a breakdown or breakthrough. And the Middle East or Western Asia is the battlefield, and it has finally come. Um, you see, you have in this last several years, you've had Benjamin Netanyahu, who is the longest serving prime minister in Israeli history, who for years, in fact, there's tapes of it where he's been saying, Iran is ready to have a nuclear weapon in 6 months, in 2 months, in 2 years, in 10 years. He's doing it even now. He's been doing these bad predictions that everybody just sops up since 1995, folks. And he's been wrong, 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 wrong every way. And, they don't. But so I get now back to, why did Ali um, Khamenei, Khamenei uh, put himself in a position to be martyred? It's the first casualty of this war. Why were these others who were with him decided to go with him? I think they set a trap, not so much a trap, but for the ignorance of their enemies. Trump and all those people are profoundly ignorant people, and they are being they're being guided. It's, by the way, we have a Mercury retrograde. This war started in a Mercury retrograde. Um, Literally a few days into it. there every 4 months, Mercury goes for a 3 week process of going backwards in the sky because it's ahead of us. So it does retrograde moves like Venus. And when that happens, you might notice that your dreams get more vivid. You're tongue-tied more than you are for the last 4 months. That decisions that are not communicated clearly often blow up or falter. That instrumentation, and there's more plane crashes during this period. And I've studied this all my life because there's all kinds of pitfalls where you just, okay, you're just selecting it when it's happening. But no, I have been watching for years the period of 4 months and these retrograde issues. And there is something about it that happens. Usually a retrograde Mercury, because it's about your mind, and the Mercury, the messenger, your mind sending you messages, whether they're aspected to the other planets to be garbled or enhanced, is how Mercury is aspected in charts of countries, as well as charts of people, as well as charts of religions. Um, so, birth charts. Um, so there's of all the passages through the zodiac of the 12 kinds of retrograde that can happen with Mercury, the most powerful, the most obfuscating, the most spacey, the most gullible, the most completely gaga of them is Mercury in Pisces, because then it's an issue of the subconscious. Pisces is the doorway of the subconscious, the oceanic messenger, the mass message. It's also, where the subconscious is influencing your conscious world, with you mostly being unaware of how you're unconsciously motivated to make decisions like go to war or etc. So, um, I will be going a little further in some of the astrology here because it is most remarkable what's going on in the astrology. And with um, this war will be longer. I predicted that it wasn't going to be 5 days and stuff. I predicted that by mid-March, it would be entering its reckoning that would go for another month into mid to late April. And that's because of this influence, not just this line of planets. That's a very nice thing that's happening right now, all these planets lining up. But a lineup like that usually predates what is called a stellium in astrology. That means a massive conjunction of 4 to 5, 6 planets. Very rare. The stellium is in Aries. It will have in it, at a certain point, the sun and the moon will even join it in April. And when the sun is in Aries and the moon is in Aries, that would be around the new moon, around the latter half of April. And then there's also Mercury in Aries, mind. You got Sun, ego essence of a nation or of an individual. The moon, the emotional ruler. Either emotions are stable or unstable. You have the messenger of Mercury, also joining them in Aries. You have Mercury conjunct. They're in Aries, but they're not really conjunct the sun and the moon. But Mercury then joins a conjunction of Mars, god of war, Saturn, reality or delusions, and Neptune, the ruler of Pisces. It's also the maker of earthquakes, earthquake-like changes, because Neptune is also not the god, only the god, the Roman god, like Poseidon, the Greek god. Neptune is the Roman name of the god of the ocean and earthquakes. So it's all in Aries. It it starts really influencing the end of this war, reckoning who is a wreck or a winner of this war. and it's history changing. All of you who are alive, and maybe except for a few people who are lingering, who were involved in World War II, in this current conventional World War III, which is now 4 years old, we're talking about even greater changes than happened at the end of World War II. We're literally seeing the whole post-World War II world start to disappear and be reconstituted in the next 2 years because of this war into another post-World War III world that is as significant a change for everyone on the planet as was the end of World War II, but even more so. So the Grand Ayatollah was saying, I've noticed this, I've had a feeling that he wasn't going to live out this war. He's 86. He has often openly said that he never wants to die as an enfeebled old man. And he's getting old. And so he made a decision. He chose to be a conscious martyr. They made these messages in the clear. Everybody that came to the meeting was easily known by Trump's people and stuff that they were going to be in the compound. Not the president of Iran was not going to be there. The people that were highest ranking people of the Revolutionary Guards. You got to understand that Islam has two major sects. One's the vast majority Sunni sect, and then there's 206, that's about 2 billion people almost of the Earth's population. It's a major religion, but there are 260 million people, mostly in the Middle East, mostly where the oil is. Even Saudi Arabia's northeastern quadrant is Shia. Shia Islam, there's two basic things. The Sunnis, the mainstream, they believe that caliphs, that's be popes that oversee the Islamic Ummah, the community of believers, the caliph is elected by the head priests and all of that and the people. The Shia believe that the caliph should be a bloodline, just like the bloodline of Sang Royal of the books, Brown's books and stuff like that. That it should be a family bloodline directly descendant to Muhammad. So the first of the caliphs was Ali, and then his son Hussein was the next. And then there was a dispute between the people who said, no, it should be elected, not be a bloodline. And so this actually started what has been kind of a brewing, smoldering religious civil war in Islam since its beginning in the 600s, mid 600s AD. It got so bad that Muhammad was poisoned. Although he survived the poison attack, he lingered in agony for 7 more years teaching before he departed his body. Ali then was the founder of the Shia. He was martyred, and Hussein was martyred. And there is a very strong core to the mindset of the Shia, which the Iranians are, all Shia. The 2/3 of Iraq is Shia. The Hezbollah, southern Lebanese Arabs are Shia. The northeastern corner where all the oil of Saudi Arabia is actually a Shia population, not Sunni like the Saudi king and the majority of the Saudis. The Ansarallah Houthi have been fighting aircraft carriers and one of the few nations to actually stand up and fight for the Palestinians openly and close the Red Sea. And the U.S. spent 6 weeks fighting them with two carrier groups. And finally, there was, it's actually been covered up, but one of the missiles of the Houthis actually put a hole in the aircraft carrier's deck. And it was very secreted and secreted off immediately after that happened. No one wanted to see the wound that was punched by some simple mountain people of one of the greatest instruments of war that the Americans have. But it was patched. And then there was the other carrier there that almost was struck a couple times by rockets fired by the Houthi. So much so that the carrier, in turning away from the missile, was so steep that some of the wires that held in first one and then two Super Hornets, two-seater Super Hornets, very expensive jets, both dumped into the Red Sea and sank. There were a lot of these globes, one of the most powerful drones that we had surveilling, because they needed that to find where these missiles were coming out of caves. And so what happened in that war that they ended up shooting those down, the Houthi. And these were like multi-billion dollar drones. So whole lot of money was spent and lost, and the Americans just declared, they bombed Hodeidah and the oil refinery there a few times and bombed the town of Hodeidah on the coast of Yemen, and then do what maybe the Americans might do this time, only be a much bigger farce than it was back then. They declared victory and the carriers left. They declared victory, but what happened is this very backwater, small group of people actually stopped the United States Navy. And so now they are also Shia. It's interesting about the Shia. When you hear this story that it's constantly drummed in, even during this war, you have Trump just following the reading notes and saying, that the greatest source of terrorism, Middle Eastern Muslim terrorism in the world is Iran. That is an absolute lie. Who hit us in 9/11? Who killed nearly 3,000 U.S. civilians in a terrorist attack? The Sunni Al-Qaeda. Who invaded Iraq and is ISIS with the help of Israel and the United States? Wasn't Shia. It was the Sunni ISIS, Daesh, or Daesh, as the acronym in Arabic is. It's the Islamic State. All the terrorists that have been killing Americans have been Sunnis. They have no connection with the Shia. They consider the Shia apostates that should be murdered. In fact, they do a lot of murdering of Shias because they consider them heretics. The other thing that the Sunnis seem to look the other way in these extremist groups, terrorist groups out of the Sunni, is the five virtues of being in Islam as a believer. They don't follow one of the five, so they're heretics. They believe in jihad, the struggle of, it means two things. It's a religious struggle in your own self, but jihad can also be a collective war, sacred war against, enemies of Islam. But in that rules of the five, you're never, ever supposed to kill civilians. You only kill the warriors of your opposing force. Al-Qaeda, with Osama bin Laden, ignored that. He said, no, we target everybody, men, women, children, soldiers of America, of that. So So all of that has nothing to do with Iran. Nothing. And who was, and another thing to understand, Iran, you talk about several thousand Americans being killed by terrorists, which I point out are not Iranian based. How many, how many Iranians have the United States and its allies, its satraps like Saddam Hussein in the 1980s, during the Persian Gulf War from 1980 to 1988. Um, I was flying my first trip to be um, become a sannyasa, a disciple of my master. Um, about 2 days into that war, and my Air India flight had to stay in Heathrow for an extra 10 hours. So we're in the lounge because they wanted to fly over this fresh new war zone at night. And when I see the airlines that are doing this now, as we speak, it really reminds me back because it's much worse. I mean, I'm seeing some amazing photographs out of jet windows, civilian jet windows, of Iranian contrails of all these rockets rising out of a sea of clouds and starting to go towards Israel, and then other things coming back. I thought that was happening when we entered the Persian Gulf because I saw it on fire. There were all these fires across it. And then I looked closer and realized that they were the exhaust fume flame pipes for distilling oil. And so I was crossing over that Shia part of Saudi Arabia. But I thought Saudi Arabia was on fire from the war. So we managed to get through without further hitches. In fact, we were fine. But I'm thinking now the people that are flying over that right now are really getting a very dangerous show, and they're in the crossfires of it. But the Iran-Iraq War was a war that Donald Rumsfeld, um, in George H.W. Bush's, the father of Bush Jr., in his administration, they came and they provided all the means and satellite technology from the US and all the equipment that could make mustard gas and other World War and cyanide gas. And they literally, the United States gave weapons of mass destruction to a Sunni dictator and encouraged him to make his invasion to grab the Arabs, this Arab Azeri state that is in the westernmost province of Iran, where most of the oil is, to seize that. And the Iranians responded by defending themselves, and they eventually pushed the invading Iraqis out of that region. That's when Rumsfeld came and helped Saddam Hussein out. And they said, well, gas them, launch gas on them, on these Iranian forces. At least 300,000 of the 500,000 Iranians that the United States helped Saddam Hussein kill, well, thanks to United States weaponry and instruction and building of chemical weapons to do it. You know, it's amazing that they're so, whenever they meet Americans, even now in Iran, how friendly Iranians are to them, given that our governments have been killing, at least we've killed 500,000 of them. What would you do if Al Qaeda had killed 500,000 Americans? You know, it was bad enough that it was just under 3,000, but we have killed 500,000 of their people. And now, not once but twice, have we lured them in with Trump saying, yeah, we're negotiating. And just like what happened in June when the surprise attack happened with the Israelis attacking Iran, here's Trump saying, hey, we're really close to a breakthrough. I'm looking forward to the Iranian diplomatic team coming, and we'll sort this out this weekend, or on Friday. And what he then did a few hours after that, he agreed to a decapitation attempt on the Iranians that killed 1,000 people, killed dozens of nuclear scientists and their extended families and their neighbors in apartment buildings that, they didn't selectively take out these people. They literally razed whole apartment buildings full of innocent people, men, women, and children, people that were not even family members and family members, wiped out whole families. And they did this all across Iran. Um, and and then the Iranians, after 18 hours of their Pearl Harbor attack, got their stuff together with some help of the Russians, ended the stuff that was interrupting their signals for their anti-missile batteries. And then they started pounding in what was called a 12-day war. They pounded Israel almost to its just where it was literally Netanyahu was calling Trump and said, you got to somehow make some kabuki here and make a strike here and make them have a strike there and end this, because if you don't do it, we're going to launch nuclear attack on Iran, because we are losing this. We are going down. Um, and Israel is going down because these people have these missiles. They've used their missiles in such a way. They use all their old missiles to make the David Sling and the THAAD American batteries, as well as the Iron Dome. Literally, when you're firing on a ballistic missile, you have to at least fire two missiles against it. And we're seeing it again in this war. The Americans are probably going to sustain this brutal attack, devastation of Iran for about 1 to 2 weeks maximum. But then they run out of weapons to defend themselves, because the Iranians they're launching their missiles. Iran is a vast place. It is the size of Western Europe. It's mountainous. I've flown over it many times. You would not want to fight a country. Imagine if you were in the Spanish Civil War in the high Sierra Mountains of Spain, and imagine that an area the size of Western Europe. And you're going to go and try to find all these caves that are across the entire country with underground cities of missiles. And now what's happened since the last time is the Iranians have improved upon it. Most of those missile launchers are decoys that have been destroyed, and I can see the same decoys are getting destroyed again. The Iranians have doorways that open out of the ground and make the missile rise, and then they fire it. So, you got to catch them. You got to do whack-a-mole in a place that's so vast, where you're constantly being painted by radars that are now Chinese advanced. The Chinese have given Iran their 3D Beidou technology, and they can actually track the carriers and any other ships that we have there with a strike capacity of a variance of 1 meter. So, but those missiles aren't going out yet. They're doing the same thing. They have maybe hundreds of thousands of these missiles, and they definitely have they're smaller caliber missiles that have a range of 300 miles, can strike every U.S. base in the Persian Gulf and southern Iraq. And they have 600,000 of those, and cruise missiles and all. They're very good. The Al Assad base that was given back in 2020, when Soleimani, one of the most beloved leaders of Iran, was assassinated by Trump in his first term. Uh, they the Iranians then showed the restraint of saying, we have to launch after we bury our dead, we will strike you. And so they announced to the Americans in Al Assad base and another base near Erbil, that in Kurdish Iraq and in southern Iraq, they said, our cruise missiles are coming. Get your people into their bunkers. We want to make a demonstration of what we can do. Now, I've said this story before with you, that all that night they pounded with 23 missiles Al-Assad Air Base north of Baghdad, and they were in their bunkers, and the reinforced bunkers for all the drone operators, because they murdered Soleimani with a drone. They were trying to fly their drones out of the danger and just keep them hovering until all the missiles surgically struck the base. And in the morning, and you can see it, I had the pictures in the Hogue Prophecy report of the satellite shots of what they did. It was very surgical. That's when I realized, my God, the Iranians are ahead of us now in Tomahawk missile technology. Their missiles are even more accurate. And the way they did the previous year, where they surgically struck Aramco as a demonstration of what they could do to Saudi Arabia's oil fields. And it was surgical. They just hit the main pumping conduits to all those towers. You see the holes all just perfectly in them. And that actually started a process where Saudi Arabia started through back channels to create a level of détente between the two Gulf regional powers. And it actually succeeded up till this last few days, that Saudi Arabia and Iran were actually moving towards a coexistence in the Persian Gulf. But this Trump has ruined that. He started by this bad advice he got to murder Soleimani, ignorant of the fact of how important this man was, ignorant of the fact that he was like equivalent for Iran in to General or President Eisenhower to us. And another person who was collaterally killed was the most beloved general of the Iraqi Shia, who both those two commanders are responsible for the defeat of ISIS and its absolute devastation. Not Trump, not he can brag about it, but this was a huge war that hardly any of you in the West know that happened in 2014 through 2019. It was the utter defeat of ISIS, but the survivors of ISIS were then nourished back into power by Israel, by the United States as their terrorists. And they have, with the help of a former leader of ISIS, al-Julani, in 2024, they collapsed the Syrian government, and now all of Syria is under an Islamic State, just like before, just like al-Baghdadi, the caliph of the heretical Islamic State. And they're killing tens of thousands of Christians because it's one of the oldest Christian settlements is Syria. We are bankrolling that. We are using them as our useful idiots. But you will be told, oh, it's Iran. Iran's killed all these people. No, you're being lied to. And if you read my reports and if you look at my sources and then read their sources, you're going to find out just to what extent this has happened. Because that's what I like with my Hogue prophecy. I'm a gatekeeper. You go through me, please go through the links of all the other people in the alternative media that I use in my work, that I've vetted for sometimes 20 years, sometimes 10. And because of their ongoing accuracy, you will see a world that you live in that is very, very different from the world that you watch on your cell phone and TV from mainstream news sources. And, I've said this again and again. If World War III, the conventional World War III, goes nuclear and fulfills Stormberger's famous World War III prophecy that the people of the world will walk with their eyes wide open into these catastrophes, your eyes are wide open with ignorance, and ignorance will kill you. And I don't want that to happen to you or me. But this is really what you're facing. Your ignorance is so evil. Your misinforming is so much the trigger of your end and the end of this civilization. And it's very, very close in these next 2 years. Very, very close. You must become informed. It will be a matter of life and death that you begin to become informed and then become more active. Learn your constitution, learn your responsibilities as a citizen of a democratic nation. If you do not, you will be destroyed. So, so what happened is Soleimani laid a trap for Trump. And what is happening is his death was not a regime change. His death, his martyrdom, brought 260 million Shia into his camp, into his side of this war. Through using his life in the last gesture of his long life as a catalyst to unite a large portion of the Islamic world to rise up against your Western meddlers, your Western leaders and armies, and break this pattern of, we hit them a little and then we go and negotiate and it looks like negotiating's happening. Then we murder the negotiators. This is and this operation Epic Fury, I think I'd rather call it Operation Epstein Fury, because this is a war that's being waged by Zionist ethno supremacists who are trying to, with Netanyahu, who has tried, they've defeated all the other axis of resistance people. Hezbollah has been put in a corner. The Palestinians are being murdered and starved to death. The Houthis do things, but it's a small uh, punctures to this huge enemy. But they, um, it's all, Donald Trump is completely compromised by whatever he did with his pal for many decades, Epstein. And, the island and the Virgin Islands and the cameras rolling. They didn't just take pictures of the Prince Andrew fellow, former Prince Andrew. He's compromised. And not only is he compromised, but Zionist AIPAC, which is a doorway for Zionist money and corruption influence, has corrupted our Senate and our Congress, the House of Representatives. You just dial it in AI and look at how much money AIPAC, which is a front for the Israeli government, Zionist Israeli government, I make a distinction. It's equal to making a distinction between Germans and Nazi Germans. It's the same thing. The Zionists um, have bought with hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, and Adelson is part of this as a Mossad asset. Miriam Adelson and her husband before have completely bankrolled Donald Trump, but at a great price. He's literally hostage of them and Netanyahu. And I've said it again and again that it may still happen, that if he backs out of this war, and if it gets into the Aries stellium, one of the greatest dangers that can happen in this war, when the U.S. weaponry and Israeli weaponry is running out, because the U.S. has almost emptied its entire stocks of strategic arms in Ukraine, and now to bomb to lunar landscapes, Gaza, and now in this war. And he's decided to gamble it all. He spent all these months building up a force of attack that's even greater than, I would contend, that was prepared for Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003 March. He's 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 gambling. He's put the whole chips on the table, and the chips of weapons will run out, and the Iranians will keep. That's when the Iranians, because they run out, because all those thousands of missiles that are being shot down in a month of Iranian missiles are there to eat up what's left. Because again, 2 to 4 missiles for every one Iranian. If you shoot down 1,000 Iranian missiles, you will use 2,000 to 4,000 of your far more expensive missiles. These ballistic missiles may be a few $100,000 that the Iranians are throwing at us, but the Iron Dome and some of these other missiles that we're firing in reply are millions of dollars. This is a war of dollars, and we are losing it exponentially. Our weapons are too expensive and not very good. We don't even know how to do hypersonic missiles yet. The Iranians are doing them as well as the Chinese and the Russians, and they even may have their own version of the Oreshnik, a kinetic hypersonic missile, regional ballistic missile that might also be launched. And now they're being guided. Why is China and Russia helping the Iranians? People, that is a good question to ask. Well, this is the bigger picture you're not going to get in the mainstream news. This war, this is a region of a bigger war. This war, this third world war that's conventional at the moment since February 2022, starting with Ukraine theater and then 2023 with the Western Asian theater. This is a war of between the declining dominance of 500 years of Western hegemony that had a colonial empire, different various colonial empires that completely controlled the world, controlled China and besieged Russia with invasions and all of that the Russians beat back. But there was a whole century where China was being broken up by colonial forces of the West. And that all ended with Mao finally won the Western-backed, probably the greatest civil war in history with men, material, and losses, the Chinese Civil War, which was raging starting in the 1920s and then kind of showed the two sides fighting against the Japanese in World War II. But when World War II was over, then the years up to 1949, there were the vast million-man armies between national Chinese armies against the Red Chinese armies, and it was won by Mao. And the Communist Republic of China was created, or the People's Republic of China, PLA, of PLC or whatever. Anyway, they're helping because the Iranian leadership, Moscow and Beijing, know that this war America is leading with the European satraps and potentially in the Taiwan theater with Japan, which has become a fascist nation again. It always kind of hid that. Now they're openly about rearming, which is against the treaty that they signed that ended World War II. So there's unfortunately, I love Japan, but it has quite a fascist streak that never really was suppressed or defascified at the end of World War II. And now that ugliness is coming forth again. That was there in Imperial Japan. And they have openly said that the third major front of this war may get active because the Japanese say that if the Chinese try to take back, which everyone already says Taiwan is a state and part of China since 1979, but these governments ignore that. Trump ignores that. He ignores law and treaties. He says my morality, my morality is really better than all these laws. The Don is becoming a Don. The Donald is becoming a Don. He's acting like a gangster. He is a gangster. He does not follow law. And the Congress, which is bought by the Israeli government, is not applying its powers to sit him down and say, you either start following our constitutional laws or we'll impeach you. No, they're all bought too. We are an occupied country. Our Washington is occupied by a foreign nation who wants to use us as its cannon fodder in its wars in Western Asia. That's as succinct as I can make it. So this battle, the bigger picture of this battle is that Iran strategically is a threat to the Western powers because so if they can break it up, Israel doesn't want that fuzzy fellow, the Shah, the son of the Shah. Even Trump doesn't talk to him. He's such a fool. He's not looking at the monarchs taking over Iran. In fact, if they even set foot in there, they'd all get killed. Um, the people of Iran suffered the Savak secret police. You see, there's another story that you won't hear about. Iran became a democracy and threw out the Shah's father, the Shah Pahlavi's father, and he was the crown prince. In 1953, the people voted democratically to depose the Shah and have the oil that's coming out of their oil fields be paying for their country and not having almost all the money going to British Petroleum. So British Petroleum complained to MI6, and MI6 complained to the CIA, and then the CIA did an overthrow of that democratically elected government. One of the 82 to 85 times the CIA has deposed democracy, not supported it in the time after the World War II. And so they put him in Mossadegh, who was the prime minister, very popular with the people. They put him in solitary confinement for 6 years. And then MI6, with the help of CIA, but mainly using the Mossad of Israel as the trainers of the Savak. And the way they train them is they train them to be even more vicious than people that they had suffered in the Holocaust, the Gestapo, Nazi Gestapo. They wanted the Savak to be even worse because they knew what the Gestapo could do. They wanted the Iranians to feel even worse tyranny than what they suffered in the Holocaust. And so the Savak was probably one of the most vicious police state organizations, and for the next 27 years terrorized Iran to the point that this drove the Iranian people away from us and into the arms of the Islamic Revolution. At first secular, and then it became, and also what happened to Iran's a very religious country. It's not so much in Tehran, but in the other cities and the rural areas, it is staunchly supporting. I I have seen something remarkable today in this second day of the war as it closed. I have seen a couple things. I have seen pro-monarchists in Tehran with their ritzy cars and upper class that are still there in Iran who have the freedom to be there. They're all honking their horns and they're dancing the streets at the death of the Ayatollah. But if you look, that's only a few hundred people in a few hundred cars. And but you will not see the West show you the tens of millions of people that have been marching in solidarity and celebration of Ayatollah Khamenei and Ayatollah Khamenei. And these people are flooding the streets under bombardment, defiantly with their flags. I've seen this amazing shot where it's at night and the streets are filled with men and women and the flags of Iran and pictures of Khamenei. And they're literally looking up to the sky in millions of them as their own anti-aircraft tracers are flying up to fire on American bombers and Israeli bombers that are literally dropping bombs on them. That's a people you can't defeat. That's a people who took, unlike the West, that's a people who took on what the Ayatollah did to choose martyrdom. Okay, here I am. You want to take me? You think that's going to end with me dying? It just begins. And what he did, because you understand the culture of martyrism and Shias, the Shias even fell in love with him more than they loved him already for doing that. It's like Jesus standing up and say, "Okay, I don't need a Christ. I don't need a cross. You want to drop a big bomb on me, America, and give me my crucifixion by American bombs? Look what happens after you set this fire in the hearts of my people, 260 million of them. So there's a grim resolve. It's an existential crisis. You're talking about the Iranian people are going to fight this war like the Soviet people fought against Nazi Germany and its millions of invaders. This is existential. Their existence is at risk. And so this is a grim resolve that these idiots that are running the West have no idea what they've unleashed against them. And it is going to, they are going to lose. And I will tell you what regime change began yesterday, overnight yesterday. It's the regime change of America. It's the regime change of Bahrain and the Gulf, a lot of the Gulf mafia fiefdoms. It's the regime change of the United Arab Emirates. It's the regime change of Qatar, uh, who financed ISIS for most of what it did to create the Islamic State. Now, Saudi Arabia made the mistake. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman made the mistake of declaring war on Iran because Iran had warned them, says, look, and they warned everybody, it's no surprise. The Iranians said, we will, if you strike us, if you try to kill our leaders and strike our country with a huge blow, we will make this a total regional war. We will drag the entire region into this war. And if you are the Gulf states that have used your radars to aid the Americans and the Israelis to bomb us, you will be bombed. If you're the Saudis, who have one of the largest parkings of the US jets that will do some of this launching into Iran, you will be bombed. You will be missiled. And they are. They're being missiled hard right now. And these are the old missiles. They're not even starting to use their new hypersonic missiles, which can't be knocked down. And what could very well happen in this is that a third line of stuff that I've been looking at since 2006, 2007, a third line of Nostradamus prophecies is about the third and final Antichrist of Nostradamus's prophecies. There are three Antichrists, unique in prophecy that he foresaw three Antichrists, not one like the Bible does. The first Antichrist's name is Napoleon. Paul ne Oleron is the anagram. It mixes into Old French spelling, Napoleon, Roi, R-O-Y, for king. R-O-I, Roi, is what French says now, but it would look like Roy, that's where we get Royale, which is a French source of royalty. It comes from the root of Old French, since the Battle of Hastings and the Normans, my people, I'm a Norman, Hogue, La Hogue, invaded England in Hastings. And then what happened is the English language, which was basically Anglo-Saxon, it now a third of what you call English, a third of what we call English words are French, because the Normans had assimilated, Norwegian Vikings had assimilated with the Franks that lived in Normandy. And so a lot of what like rendezvous or a lot of words you think that are commence, that's commence, that is French. So we have a lot of French in our language. So if Hastings had gone a different way in 1066, if the Normans had been defeated, then English would be completely different. It would be more closer to German and Anglo-Saxon than it is English that we would know. So anyways, a little cultural side there. Um, so the and start thinking about your questions if you're sorry for your waiting a bit, but I'm soon going to finish this talk. So get your questions ready, but I want to finish the talk first. This is important. Um, so the the what the regime changes that are coming to the US president. If he loses this war, which he will, um, and if he tries begging for some show of token actions to call peace, that is never going to happen. They're done with us in that trick, murdering their peacemaker. I mean, my God, what kind of a bestial nation have we become that we welcome people into negotiations and kill them, not once, but twice? What kind of barbarity has this country descended to? Well, when you have a fascist entity that has bought and sold the government, um, we become like the fascists. Our people are being led by our leaders, bought and sold by a fascist element from a foreign country to do treason against our Constitution. So what then happens is Trump is basically setting the stage for his complete collapse as a president. He is the biggest regime change that is coming in the next few years from this war. And he'll either go with, because what'll happen is to save face, it'll be interesting to see what happens, whether the people have been bought and sold that are our legislators will break from their sugar daddy, Jerusalem, and actually return themselves to the people and the people's needs. I mean, this is the president that promised never to get into any foreign wars again. This is the president who helped make MAGA and destroy it completely. MAGA is dead. He went against every promise that he made. Maybe it was always going to be about him being a tool for some Armageddon planned by another country that bought him. So that brings an interesting political upheaval that this country will enter with the stellium coming of Saturn's transit through Aries, which will be over in April of 2028. In that period, I think we'll see the largest political upheaval. And let's consider this also that I've not mentioned. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. That is 20 to 25% of all the oil that flows out of that little Strait of Hormuz, which Nostradamus named by the name he knew it in the maps of his time in the mid-16th century as Carmania. Nostradamus was rare amongst prophets. He was hugely into maps and locales. 650 of them are mentioned. Real historical places, nations, by the names they were known by then. For instance, the Ukrainian area of Russia was called Borstinas, the Borstein in Greek place. And what did he talk about? He talked about the law of More, which is the Sir Thomas More, a English contemporary of Nostradamus, who wrote Utopia. Utopia is basically a socialist manifesto. He called it seeing it in the future in the terms that he would understand and define it as More's law. He talked about a disaster that would see Thomas More's law be replaced by another form of government. Chernobyl in April and May of 1986 was that disaster. That region of the Borstinas is where Pripyat is. Near Kiev, in the Soviet Ukraine. That was the cause of the whole issue of there's something really wrong with the Soviet Union if such a disaster could happen. It made Gorbachev, whom I, by the way, predicted in my early articles on the Osho Commune, when it was unknown for most. I predicted in one of my articles that there would that there would be Andropov would die and he would be replaced by another person that was even sicker. And then I said, this young man, Gorbachev, he's the guy who's going to be the runner of the Soviet Union. And it would, everybody goes, oh, well, that's easy. And no, when you're on this side of the prophecy's fulfillment, you got to remember where you were on the other side when nobody had any idea who Gorbachev was. I predicted he would be the last Soviet premier, and he was. And I have a whole lot of sannyas disciples who can concur, who read my articles back in 1984, I think, for that one, in the Rajneesh Times. So, so huge transformations are coming from this. And even though there's going to be a lot of chaos and upheaval, remember, you have a choice. When things that have been stuck are broken, you can, that's an opportunity. It's not just a, oh my God, civil war and this and that. Yes, it can be that. Economic collapse, I mean, we're going to see, a depression from this. This will be the beginning. Our Western economies are very fragile. And Trump has been throwing billions and billions of dollars into these military, Venezuela, and now this. He is, I don't know what level of money he's burning away. He's probably going even over budget for the military industrial complex with all this money that he's throwing at this. There's no end to it. And well, there is an end. It will lead to a U.S. defeat, which will be a shock to the world, which will be our version of the, he really shouldn't call it the Armada. He likes that name, like the Spanish Armada, but he's too dumb to remember what happened to the Spanish Armada. The Spanish Armada was decimated by the English in 1588. Philip II had sent this huge armada of 130 war galleons with an army that was in Dutch region, Belgic region, that was part of the Habsburg Spanish Empire. And the Duke of Parma and his army would then be shipped by this army over the British Channel to defeat England at the approaches of London. And so the big battle happened that actually they used fire ships, the English, to confuse the Spanish galleons, to cut their anchors and go north, following the north wind into the North Sea because of these fire ships, which would set them all on fire. And thus the Duke of Parma had no ships to send over to England. So the Spanish galleons, which had been in 3 or 4 engagements with the British, who were lesser numbered, but they had longer cannons that could reach farther, so they could stand off and shoot at the galleons. Well, they all went north, following the North Sea winds. It's getting into October, and what they decided is that they would go back to Spain, lick their wounds, go back to Spain by going around Scotland, but then navigating to be far enough outside of beyond Ireland to go into the deep Atlantic, deep water navy as they were, and safely then do a long arc around and navigate their way back to the harbors of Portugal, which was part of Spain at that time, and Spain. The Spanish Empire was at its peak at that time under Philip II in the 1580s. Well, they miscalculated the navigation, and they ended up too close to the Irish coast right when the October gales began. And then another huge portion of the Spanish galleons were crashed upon the rocky cliff coast of Ireland. And the wrecks, and then the Irish came and killed whoever survived the wrecks. This loss of the Spanish Armada, when it finally tattered and what was left of it went back to Spain, that was the high water mark of the Spanish Empire, the Spanish Habsburg Empire. That was the beginning of a long decline. This war, this armada, is a repetition of the same foolery. Donald Trump is playing Philip II. They were also ignorant of a lot of things they didn't the greatest admiral, one of the greatest admirals in history was going to be the admiral of the Spanish Armada. And if he had been, I think we'd have a very different history. He was, his name's really long, but he was really a good admiral, one of the greatest in history. But Philip, because he was so truthful to the king, Philip didn't like that, so he shocked. Everybody was shocked. He says, "Well, no, I'm gonna." He picked this idiot, basically. He picked a Donald Trump to run the Navy. This Segovia, I think was his name, when this prince. And he was just a dolt. He didn't know anything about Mariner. He's probably one of the reasons why the navigation didn't work. And he didn't know how to run a navy. And so, from the greatest hands was given to an idiot's hands, the Spanish Armada. Kind of sounds like a karmic echo to me, doesn't it? You've got this idiot president and an idiot cabinet who don't know anything, and they don't. And if you don't know your enemy, you're going to be defeated by your enemy. If your knowledge of your enemy is that you project upon, oh, they're weak, they're stupid, they're Iranians, what could they do? We're so wonderful, our doo-doo doesn't stink. Um, and if you're doing that, you are actually you're the weak one. If you don't know your enemy, if you don't think how your enemy thinks, if you're just too high and mighty to do that, you're going to be defeated. And you are going to be defeated, America. And it will be a more rapid decline of U.S. empire than what happened to the Spanish. The Spanish, it took a couple more years, but certainly they couldn't reach out like they had with Philip. Your Philip is Donald J. Trump. And this is the end of your hegemonic period. So there's an opportunity here. Come home, America. Pull up all those bases and come home and put all of your wealth and your attention and energy into restoring the constitutional government of this country, restoring the freedoms, and rebuilding America. This country is falling apart. It's becoming a ruin because of all this money that we're throwing on wars. And you know what? Except for Grenada and Panama, we haven't won a war since World War II. We suck. And it's time we get the idea that we suck because we're going the wrong direction. Come home, America. I think this war in Iran is going to put a great big boot in the butt, sending us home. All right, I'm done.
We have several questions here.
Okay.
So let's start with the first one that popped up earlier during the broadcast. There is a pronouncement, "You will reap what you sow," perhaps the simplest of prophecies for those that see. What will the recent attack on Iran sow, and will we, U.S., and the world reap?
Yes.
This is by Rick Gordon, who typed in the question.
Oh, Rick. Hello, Rick. That's a very good question. Rick asks great questions. I love reading him almost daily. He's kind of a pen pal. So, well, Rick, yes, the world is going to reap, but primarily the Western world is going to reap. Primarily, this war is a war against the BRICS nations, which are aided along in the future and fortunes of the three most powerful, influential countries that are part of the BRICS global majority, which is basically a very positive thing that you'll never hear about in the West, because you wouldn't hear positive things if you lived in Nazi Germany either about what's going on beyond Nazi Germany. A similar problem we have here is that if we're in the West, we are coming to this. Everything comes in cycles, whether we like it or not. And we've been involved as the pinnacle of power in a 500-year process, which is coming to an end, which will see the West be a backwater where Eurasia and the global South will be the real history makers, for better and worse, of humanity for the rest of this new century. And we can, if we wish, take care of ourselves and redefine and come home to our virtues, because it's so unnatural for Americans to play hegemonics. We we left, our founding fathers and mothers left the hegemonic Europe and the tyranny of Europe to just be a republic, to be away from all that, from not going out and fighting dragons and stuff that we don't need to do. There was a virtue in our isolationism, and it just happened that when we became a big power in the world to be, economically and all this, the temptation was that we would finally get involved, starting to slay the dragons that Europeans and other people always seem to fight and get in trouble with. We started in World War One. We lost 110,000 dead and a quarter million wounded in 10 months of combat in the Western Front. But we were the tipping point that was the 1918 was the dawn of America as a world power. But it still was isolationist. In fact, a lot of Americans came out of the experience of World War One absolutely disgusted with like they were thinking, what the hell did we do? Why did President Wilson send us there? We got lost a lot of people, and it was to help other people win their stupid wars. So there was a very healthy, I think, reaction to that, response to that of American people. They said, let's let Europe solve its own wars, fight its own wars, and let's just live in our home and make it wonderful and not be bothered by these fighting overseas issues. We left Europe because of that. Why are we going back there? Now, what then happened is World War One was just an unsolved chapter, first act of what is called by certain German, like Eugen, a really good historian, German-born, who was a professor in UCLA, and he coined the phrase of the second 30 Years' War of Germany. Now, 30 Years' War was in the 17th century was a 30 years where Protestants and Catholics, mostly German states and Bohemian states, raged in this terrible war that killed half the population of Central Europe. It was so terrible that it created the whole Westphalian concept of treaties, which kind of the dawn out of all those people, millions of people killed. It was the dawn of modern diplomacy, modern statecraft. How to talk your way out of wars more than just after there's been winners and losers. That's one aspect. There's many more. That's a bit simplistic of me, but it was a big change. That changed course of history because of the horrors of those wars. So what happens is Germany fought for 4 years in World War One, and then there was a 20-year pause, and then fought another 5 or so years, 6 years, and it all comes up to 30 years. So that's why he called it the 30 Years' War. And that was the only previous time when large tracts of Germany was a lunar landscape, ruins, depopulated. It was back from 1618 to, well, 30 years after that. It started then and it ended in the end of the 1640s, 1648, I think. And so they had a second 30 Years' War with two world wars. And these were triggered by fascists. The Imperium gave birth to Hitler and the fascists in Germany. And we have a problem with fascists again that haven't been there since World War II. We have a fascist state that is Ukraine, is turned into a fascist state. You will not hear this. And the Americans helped it in the Maidan coup to create the Stefan Bandera fascists running the show in Ukraine. And they viewed the Russians, which were 25% of the country's population, as subhuman as Jews, like Nazis. Germany did. And they literally terrorized them and started massacring them. But the Russians united and they formed militias like we did, and they fought back in eastern Ukraine. They fought for 8 years. And while NATO armed and expanded the fascist-run Ukrainian armed forces to the point that in 2022, when they tried almost in July, they tried in April 2021 to ethnically cleanse the Ukrainian Russians out of eastern Ukraine. But the Russians put their forces across the border very fast there, and they stepped back. But they were going to try it again. I saw it, I predicted it, and it happened. And I predicted on Coast to Coast AM when 2022 was dawning. I said, early in this new year, we will start the Third World War in Ukraine. And what happened is the Russians preempted that invasion in February of 2022. They finally heeded the demands and the requests of Russians in Ukrainian Russian states who wanted to join the Russian Federation. They finally said yes. And then ever since then, now, this is a war of liberation for the Russian-speaking parts of Ukraine, which will eventually consist of Kharkiv, the Donbass regions of Lugansk and Donetsk, Zaporozhye, already Crimea, and Odessa. These are part of the Novi Russia, who were never a part of Ukraine in any time of its history. They were forced to be part of Ukraine by the Soviet system. Big mistake. And a whole huge other part of land that was part of Poland that was ceded to Poland when the Austro-Hungarian Empire collapsed. And in that part, called Galicia, which is now what we call the eastern bulbous thing if you look at the map, look at a big area that reaches deep into Europe. That's Austro-Hungarian Polish Galician territory. And that is the main place where you find the Bandera Nazi movement. And when they took over the government with the US help in the Maidan coup, backed by the US and aided, they started to say, okay, if you're a Russian Ukrainian, you can't speak Russian anymore. You have to only speak Ukrainian. You can't worship anymore in Russian Orthodox. You have to drop that. If you have a Russian political party, we will ban it and arrest all of your leaders and put you in prison. This has all happened. You will not hear this. You will not hear this in your Western media. You will hear it and see the footage and the documentation in the Hogue prophecy reports. So anyway, this is the situation. I'm giving another big picture here, but the Ukrainian front is also going to erupt. It's not just going to be what's going on in Western Asia. I'm writing articles about Western Asia and what's going to happen in April and May, with some huge breakouts happening on the Eastern Ukrainian front. And that brings another crisis that's going to be aided by this Aries, Mercury, but mainly Mars and Saturn and Neptune in Aries. War, very bellicose, but also out of war comes great changes, great opportunities to grow and see certain regimes collapse. And that could also happen in the United States. And then there's an opportunity then for people to get back involved with their governments and aid them in growing in a better way. But if you sit on your butts, you will have more tyranny than you've ever imagined. And so don't let that happen. I'm here to tell you the bad stuff so that you will do the good stuff that's potentially possible. If you make the right choices, stop being ignorant. Your very life and the happiness of your life depends upon all of you in Europe, in America, to let go of this hegemonic crap and just be Europe, just be the United States, and stop going to war with the vast majority of the 8 billion people of this planet who are already moving with the Chinese, who are now the new major economy and country in the world, but they are not going when they go to countries, they don't put bases on the countries. They build roads, they build train speed things. They are trying to help. They want a stable world. The Russians and the Chinese are trying to build, with the BRICS nations, a stable world that that can trade freely with each other, and people let countries that are sovereign, respect for sovereign countries, let them grow in their own speeds. Don't you come in and go, you should be like, don't this Puritan American stuff. Don't do it anymore. It's not helpful. You wouldn't want somebody to force you to grow at a different speed than you're ready to. Let all the nations work out their problems by themselves and be a community of nations. It's really a wonderful thing that's developing. And because it's that wonderful, the people who are used to be in power are literally unconsciously, potentially, because there are a lot of leaders in the West who are, it's so in their DNA about us being 500 years the dominant force in the world that they can't genetically even conceive that they're going to lose. And what my greatest concern is that such people, if they're not deposed by their governments and with re-electing other more level-headed people, these people, Keir Starmer, Macron in France, Starmer in Britain, Merz in Germany, von der Leyen, Secretary General of the European, I call it the European Union. Um, the Kyla Callas, who has the brain of a rat. Well, no, sorry, I'm being insulting to rats. She's got the brain of a I don't know if she has a brain anyway. She's the foreign minister of the European Union, and she just sits there kind of like a woman child going, "Oh, I think it would be nice. Why don't we just break up Russia? They don't need all those resources just for themselves. Why don't we go in and take it all?" And I'm thinking, she's from Estonia, a country that if Russia wanted to, they could take it in 3 hours. you know, and she's talking these grandiose things at the Russians. She's an idiot. So, so you got the cokeheads, you got Merz, Macron, and Starmer. They were all caught red-handed with coke spoons and stuff in a train going out of Ukraine. Thank you, Zelensky, for the coke. Um, and they got caught, and they were like, people came in to ask, well, what happened in the meeting? And they were all kind of looking like this, and what he was hiding the coke sack of snow, and Meritz was playing with a spoon, trying to get it under his hand, but it was all just totally exposed. And they were a little high, so they were snorting coke. This is your leaders, Europe. And Zelensky, I've got footage of him totally high as a kite in his presidential seat in his office, spinning around, going, and it's not AI, it's him, and he's like talking. Well, the things he does the Green Goblin, even worse when he's snorting coke. He says, and then I will I will take care of this country. I love my children. I love my land. Ukraine, good night. And then they tried to erase all that, but it's too late. It's out there still. He's an addict. So these are your leaders in Europe. It's time to get on the streets, have elections, throw these bums out, and restore your continent, and come home to Europe. So, so anyway, this is there's just so many things to talk about, but to back to this. So this is what you're reaping. This is what Rick is. The answer, Rick, is this is what we are reaping if we don't um, if we don't stop staring like stunned mullet fish at a future that we've surrendered to some really sick people and stupid people. And you know what? There's a good side to everything. I will be very surprised if this situation in Western Asia or this potential panic attack of Europe when Russia is taking the Russian uh, New Russia back into where it belongs. When people panic as leaders, they do very stupid things. And I will think it is a miracle that we will do not see a few atomic nuclear explosions. Even my master, Osho, when he wrote about these times way back in 1983, he said, there'd be such chaos, and he's talking about climate change and the change of weather and all of that. Now the governments would be crazy, and he said that it would result, in some cases, to nuclear explosions, quote unquote. He didn't say the whole thing, and that's what I'm hopeful about. Again, I'm all for something that wakes people up. And the positive side of something as stupid as somebody launching a tactical nuke in a situation, which could really happen. When you're America and all your conventional stuff is crap, what do you got left? If you can't actually decapitate the Iranian government, well, why not drop a couple 100 megaton bombs on Tehran? You'll decapitate it for sure then, but what a world you will have then. So these insane things I'm voicing are possible in the astrology I'm seeing. They are possible. You don't even need astrology to see the situation. If you can't load your guns and win this war with Iran in the next 3-4 weeks, what do you got left? And if you are the United States just bugging out, what's Israel going to do? What are the Zionists? What is Netanyahu going to do? What is the man who has already threatened when they're losing back in June of last year, threatened Trump that he's going to use nukes on Iran unless Trump didn't get in and fight, which he did. He was ordered basically by Netanyahu to do it. So they did some kabuki, dropped a few bombs on Fordo, and then told the Iranians, okay, you can destroy the radar in IUD in Qatar, and then we call it quits. And then that's what they did. But the Iranians are not going to ever do that again. They're not going to do that again. And so they're going to fight. They're going to fight now until it's over. And they can do this. They've planned even for it to be a year. So, the Americans say, okay, well, we backed out, and the missiles will still keep coming from Iran, more and more and more modern. And then the Iranians will probably say, all right, these are our terms because we've won this war. It's not about negotiation now. We are telling the terms of ending this war. And we will not stop firing until you sign it and the whole world has seen it. We will keep fighting until you do one, lift the sanctions on Iran. All economic sanctions are dissolved. Two, you have lost the right to tell us what to do with our nuclear industries. You have proven, by killing our Ayatollah, you have replaced him with the new Ayatollah. There's a new one now, and he has always been against the fatwa. The man that's kept Iran from having nukes, you killed yesterday. You idiots, you killed him. He's now being replaced by a much younger man who thinks that the fatwas, holy laws, can be changed if the situation changes. And he's basically right. We've made him right. He's saying, well, the West has proven itself to be barbaric, uncivilized, and murderous. And so we need a deterrent. If we have a nuclear arsenal that can wipe out Israel in 6 minutes, that's when we start talking. Why is North Korea still in one piece? Because it's not Gaddafi's Libya that gave his weapons away, trusting that the West is such a wonderful, civilized world. No, once he did that good deed, we killed him. And Libya is still a failed, ruined state ever since. What have we taught the world? You better have nukes because you can't trust us. We are not trustworthy people. Trump and Democrat or Republican presidents are not trustworthy people. You're monsters. And monsters, maybe you brutes need this to get your attention. So the murdering of Khamenei, the Ayatollah Khamenei, has opened now Iran to make nuclear weapons. They will have them now as deterrence because they will follow the Islamic law. This was the other way it could be followed. And guess what? The whole people in the streets were chanting for it under fire across the cities of Iran. They were like saying, give us nuclear weapons to defend ourselves or to prevent being attacked. You know, that's, and then the other thing they would say is the IAEA Israel has a sign to open its nuclear program to the IAEA and the United Nations so that we can see exactly to what extent we're up against. You know, and so the victors dictate the ends of wars, and Iran is going to win this war and great cost to its people, like the Soviet Union, who really won World War II for us. It's going to be hard for them, but they are standing up. They're finally waking up to it. And we don't have the tools and the weapons to work that out. So this is forcing us back into upon our own homelands and selves, Rick, and everybody listening to it. And then comes the next phase of this is a lot of upheaval and activity to kind of redefine what it is to be Americans. And it better stop being this because there's no future for us if we go here. We are literally on the edge of no future for the world if Americans keep behaving the way they're behaving. And if they stop it, if they just settle on being American, following the Constitution, we'll get along fine as a member of the community that is growing in this world. And we have a much better future coming if we get out of this addiction to war. We are addicted to it. We've turned it into a business that cannot have peace on earth. Because if there's peace on earth, we don't make money. War has made the Americans war whores. And most of that money is not being given to us. Most of the money that goes into our weapons is actually traded. The billionaires that run our military industrial, though, are American oligarchs. Don't worry about Russian oligarchs. We have our own oligarchs to deal with. They're playing the stocks with most of the money we give them, and they want to. Trump wants to make it 1.5 trillion that they can play in the stock market. What's been shown, I won't go into details. I've done it before, but what has been shown since this war started, World War III conventional, and in 2022, it has shown that our weapons are profit-based, not purpose-based. They're way too expensive. The Russians and the Chinese make better jets and better missiles on a tenth of what we waste, and they don't have to go in the shop. They're not like F-35s that only 1 in 4 F-35s at any time in this moment is actually serviceable. The rest are in the shop because they're crap, very expensive crap. We've got ships that are full of crap. We've got toilets that are breaking down in our super carriers. In fact, they were aided by soft mutiny. They found in the manure when they went to Crete to unstuck the toilets. A lot of people had thrown their t-shirts in and hats and stuff to clog the system. That was a gesture. These people have been 9 months at sea. They haven't been on terra firma. This is way beyond what any crew can stand. So they're mutant. That was mutiny.
I didn't know that. Uh,
Yeah, it happened. And the
I
other
heard that there
reason,
was an issue with the plumbing, but I didn't realize it was
yeah,
self-inflicted.
the issue was people were stuffing T-shirts. They were basically saying, "Go home, we're done." And it's unique in naval history. It's never happened. It was a mutiny, and there were sea trials. I kept talking about, and people kept talking about the George H.W. Bush being in a third carrier that was supposed to come. I don't know if it had the same problems, but in sea trials, it didn't. It wasn't approved for combat action because it also had a shit show going on, and the problems with the manure in the toilet, in the heads. Um, and we are fighting when we were in Operation Iraqi Freedom. Did you ever hear our ships unloading all their missiles on Saddam Hussein and then having to steam all the way back to Europe or Diego Garcia to pick up more missiles and come back and fire some more? That didn't happen. It was a non-stop barrage because we, back then in the early part of this new century, we had a much larger assortment of men and women who are volunteering to be part of the Navy. So we had crews to crew all of our logistic cargo ships in the United States Navy. Now, the best we can do is have one cargo ship follow along a carrier strike group. You can see it. It's happened when they were fighting the Houthis, they had to go back for a month or so and go back to Naples and fill up the actual battle wagons themselves and then come back and fire some more and blow their wad and like go back and get more fireworks from the fireworks station. You cannot win. The United States Navy is no longer the most powerful navy on the world. You can't call yourself that if you don't have enough logistics to keep yourself on station firing at your enemy until the war is over. And you do that with a logistics chain of ships. The people who crew them are actually more important than a lot of the people who crew your battling vessels. Because if you don't have logistics, you will not win a war. And we don't have the logistics, and we will lose this war. We cannot sustain the damage to Iran that would require at least 10 or 12 more cargo ships, crewed fully and fully packed with missiles in a chain, constantly coming to crane the stuff onto the frigates, onto the destroyers, the tomahawks, the anti-missile, the harm missiles, all of that that can protect our carriers will be running out in about 2 or 3 weeks. And the Iranians are making sure they're shooting down a whole lot of secondhand missiles to do just that. You can't win that. So, we're like the Baltic fleet that fought Togo, the Japanese fleet in the Russo-Japanese War in 1905. They had to steam all the way around Cape of Good Horn from St. Petersburg. They had to steam all the way through the Suez Canal with the Baltic fleet, and they all ended up in the strait between Korea and Japan, fighting a modern navy that the British had built for the Japanese. And the Russian ships were so slow because their barnacles had not been shaved off their bows. They hadn't been in dry dock for like a decade. So they were literally 10 knots slower because there were all these barnacles. They were not ready to fight, and almost all the ships were destroyed of the Baltic and Black Sea fleet. And in a completely one-sided victory for Japan. Well, this looks a lot. We're becoming the Russian Baltic Fleet of 1905. Um, so it's I know this is one thing about the Aries, which is also happening. It's not just a god of war, but it's a god of what? We got to go this direction. Not this is not going anywhere. Let's go here. Start a new enterprise. Start a new journey. Aries is about starting, but indirectly, the start comes from endings. this behavior of our Navy, this behavior of our military industrial complex, this behavior of our politics, this behavior of people being illiterate to their constitutional responsibilities, and you are all responsible for not knowing your laws, not knowing how your government works, if you're Americans I'm talking to. And I would say by extension, a lot of you in Europe are just too busy having a vacation, a month or two vacations a year, and not looking at what's going on in your governments. Those people that you've been so disconnected from your European governments that your government literally doesn't give a damn what you want. 20% of the United States people are in for this, want this war. 80% are against it. They voted for this man because he wasn't going to do this kind of stuff. That's what he promised. He's let them down. He's betrayed them. And he's going to kill a whole lot of American men and women service people for a greater Israel. And unfortunately, Israel is suffering. Some of the devastation I'm seeing already. This war is not even 2 days old, and with the old missiles, because the Iron Dome's there's hardly any Iron Dome rockets going up. I mean, they're going whatever's going up is going fast. I've seen Patriot missiles. I saw a thing where a Patriot battery in Israel was at night was just launched. It was doing the very it's a very wasteful. You push a certain button in a Patriot system. They never were any good since the Gulf War of 1991. They're crap. Um, this battery unleashed a button that unleashes like a $360 million of Patriot missiles flying in a flurry straight at one hypersonic, probably a 10-year-old hypersonic Iranian missile. And that all this stuff, you think that one of these things would hit it. This missile literally just passed through the whole school of stupid fish in the sky and went whap. You almost couldn't see it. It was coming in so fast and hit its target. Goofballs.
We have one other question before we wrap it up, but
Okay.
this is from Susan, and she writes, people have been shown the Persian lion rising in their dreams and in vision before this war even started. What about those people who see the Iran Persians returning and being free?
They're dreaming. It's a dream. It isn't real. You're talking about the monarchists. You're talking about you're talking about the families who used to have their fathers work in the Savak. You're talking about Reza Pahlavi's um, modernization that some of the families that are now expatriate Persians. Yeah, life was good. Life was good. Hey, life was good in the Russian aristocracy. In the new century, the 20th century, life was good. Oh yeah, there were all those people that are oppressed, but we don't talk about them much. Life was good. Life was good in Marseille. No, life was good, I mean, in Versailles. If you were a French aristocrat, if you were king, it was good to be the king, Louis the 16th. You know, there was a certain large diaspora of people who were secularists, that's fine. But there was a class of people in Iran that profited from the tyranny of Shah Reza Pahlavi, those 27 years. But that happened after the people had voted. The majority of the Iranian people had democratically voted for their resources of oil to be theirs to profit from, not British petroleum. And I have a lot of monarchists who have a view of the good old days of Iran before the Ayatollah. That is a dream that had become for 27 years a nightmare to the rest of Iran. And they're not going to let that come back. Dream on, Macduff, said a famous Shakespearean phrase from Macbeth. Dream on, monarchists. It's a dream you will never see happen.
Okay, well, we'll end the questions. Now, I just want to remind the audience here that in the description of this video and all the videos that I've done with John, there's a link that will take you to his website. You can sign up for his periodicals and his readings. So please click that link, take a look at his website, and help support John. And if you would,
I
John,
need it, guys.
it's really important that you help support individuals that are sharing their knowledge.
Otherwise, my voice will disappear. Now, maybe a lot of people listening to me tonight would love to see my voice disappear. But if you're not one of them, I really need your help. And look at what I give. Look what I give to you. And if you get these reports, it'll even be more intricate and often funny and interesting and showing other options. It's difficult to show you all the options in a show of 2 hours. Uh, Support this if you can. If you have a yes, it's really needed now more than ever.
So, click the link. That'll take you to his website and sign up for those periodicals and readings. Now, John, if you want to just kind of briefly discuss what a reading is entailed, how they can sign up for it, how they can pay.
Mhm. That's the other thing I offer. I offer readings, a one-on-one reading. You see me as you see me now, but I'm only giving all my energy to you. And it's a reading about your life, and it's lots of fun, a lot of people. It's always people leave these readings really overjoyed, and we experience these readings can be 2 hours or more. So it's not just some little fortune telling. It goes deeper. Starts with your body mind vehicle that is described in the Kelly Blue Book, which is astrology. Uh, the potentials of the positives, the negatives, and something more. I redefine all the aspects in astrology to something that transcends their positivity and their negativity. For instance, I don't oppositions are called the point in your chart where you're attracted to things as much as you're repelled by things. And how can you find a harmony between the two? Your squares are not negative. They're not positive. They are the points of growth. They're the points that you've come in this life to be aware of and grow from your awareness and bring a more spiritual and soulful maturity. So it's not negative. I have noticed that most people who are seekers of truth have a lot more squares than they do trines. Also, trines, which are always the things that come easy to us, nothing wrong with that. But if you're like Kamala Harris, who had 19 trines and only one square, it leads to you potentially having the luck to get a heartbeat away from being president of the United States, which the trines, because they came so easy, have not allowed you to earn. I'm so glad that she didn't win for her own sake, because she would have had a nervous breakdown being a president, because she was not prepared to be president. It's not her fault. She had all these people who unconsciously kept kicking her up and up, higher, higher in politics. But she didn't earn any of it. And so trines are always like automatically, oh, it's a good thing. Well, no, it can be a bad thing if you have too many of them. And then your squares and things can help you counterbalance that. So that's one of the things that'll happen in this reading. The other thing I do is the way I work is I read you like I read the world. It's kind of different than what most people do, play the whole guess game. I'm going to sit here and say, and then the people will come to me sometimes and they'll say, well, I want to, you tell me what I'm thinking about. You tell me what's going on. And I go, well, I can't because you're putting up a wall. I can tell you exactly what you are. You're a stone wall. And I can't get anything. So can you drop your stone wall and share with me your being? this is how I read. I read the world by watching the world. The world is through my gift of being able to go all over the internet. I don't know why I have this gift, but I have it. I just can surf everywhere. And then the world tells me its troubles. It tells me its joys. It tells me all these things. And then the oracular mystery that my teacher helped initiate in me, Osho, is um, you'll set before me three or four different possibilities that you're dealing with. And what will happen is I'll say it's this one, not that one. And then we'll go into that deeper with the cards. And then I do a Celtic cross reading. And I do it in a very unusual way. Please tell me in the writings, in the questions or something, if you've known anybody that also does this thing that I do. I'd really like to know. But what I will do is I'll do the Celtic cross, which is the subject, the issue, the world of the 1/10 unconscious message, the 9/10 of well, conscious mention. We're only 1/10 conscious. So that's the card on top that I call 1/10 conscious. But it has its message, an important message, immediate to our life that way. This bottom card is the oceanic, the 9/10 of that's hidden to us that we need to become aware of. And it will tell us how that's done. Then there's the past and the future. But what I will do sometimes is I will sometimes do three of these readings. To go deeper, I'll find a card that stops. And it requires I pull it out of the first Celtic cross reading and do a new Celtic cross reading on it. And then it might pull another card in that process to a third. And then the cards start doing amazing things. I mean, you'll be a witness of it. They'll start I don't know how it works. And I guess it's good to be a millipede in this kind of work. Never think about how you walk on 1,000 legs, 500 legs on either side, or you'll fall over. So I can't figure out how this works, but it works. Suddenly, it doesn't matter where my hands are going. All these cards are just very organized and just speaking to us in the reading about here. There's the real thing to look at. And it's lots of fun. It's not like gloom and doom and stuff. I rarely have anybody who's upset in these readings. We have a great time. And what also happens is those 2 or even 3 hours go by like that. So there's a weird phenomenon of relativity, theory of relativity happening. Kind of similar to what I'll end on this. Einstein, one of my favorite jokes about Einstein is true story. He's in a cocktail party in Princeton University, and he's talking at the cocktail party with a few cocktails. People are a little more open to ask some unusual questions, so they ask the equally inebriated Professor Einstein. Uh, I'm not a science, I'm in history or I'm in social studies, and I really don't understand the theory of relativity. Can you kind of explain to me how it works? And he goes, well, yes, I'm very happy to tell you how it works. It's how one experiences, for instance, 1 hour. Well, how does one experience this? Well, when you are with your wife, 1 hour is very long, but when you're with your mistress, it's too short. That's the theory. Meditate on it. That is the theory of relativity. The perception of time changes in the conscious state of your or unconscious state that you're in.
Okay, so everybody, please, if you could, click the link, go to John's website, and take a look at his offerings and help support John. So
Thank
thank you,
you.
John, for a great show here. And everyone, thank you for
Thank you.
participating in the chat. We had a pretty good showing in the chat this go around. And in about 2 weeks or so, we're going to be doing another show talking about current events and seeing if the world.
It's going to be we're now the quickening of history has reached its peak. We are literally going to experience a change that is going to be like 2 decades every 2 weeks of new perceptions and things. We're really on the roller coaster ride now.
That's right. That's right. So everyone, thank you for joining. I greatly appreciate it.
I
John.
appreciate you all coming and listening to me and thank you.
and say goodbye to everybody.
Goodbye to everybody.
All right. Thank you for joining. So see you in 2 weeks.
Yes.
All right. Let me stop the recording here.